Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. Well, if you've watched some of my recent videos on the Kearney and Trekker, you'll know that I've been working on a DIY DRO of sorts, an open source DRO project that is designed and maintained by my friend Stefano over in Chicago. Well, in that first video, I got the DRO assembled. You can see it sitting on the table here. And I was also able to get the DRO scale for the table axis installed and working. But now my challenge is, how do I do that same thing for the knee and the saddle? The table wasn't so bad. It's fairly flat on the back, and there's some decent mounting positions for the reader. Well, the saddle and the knee have exactly zero flat surfaces, or at least no flat surfaces that would be usable for mounting a DRO scale. Well, the right side of the knee has a few issues. One is the down tube for the coolant return. There's the handle for the rapid traverse, and there's really nothing on the column to either mount a scale or reader for the knee. Well, on the left side of the knee really isn't any better. There's no flat surfaces on the knee itself. Yeah, on the column, there's that flat vertical spot, but that's really for the power feed stops. I really can't mount anything directly to it because it would interfere with the vertical power feed. And still, that doesn't remove the fact that there are no flat surfaces on the knee itself. And there's really no place for me to start drilling holes into this thing because there's stuff on the other side. So yeah, this has been a bit of a challenge, although I think I have a solution. Unlike the right side of the knee, this left side does have a few things that I might be able to take advantage of in the way of some existing threaded holes that I might be able to piggyback off of and mount at least some brackets where I can mount the scales. Well, if I can figure out how to attach a bracket in this area, it would be a good spot for me to mount the scale for the saddle. And I could hang another bracket here off of the saddle down to the reader. And I think that might take care of the saddle movement. And I think if I can make a couple of standoffs here at the top and the bottom of where the stop blocks go for the knee, I might be able to go ahead and mount a scale there, and that would take care of the knee axis. I think if I utilize these two screws here, or should I say replacing these two screws with some standoffs, and then I replace this set screw here with another standoff, and this set screw here with yet another standoff, then maybe I can manufacture a bracket that will attach to all 4 points, and that should provide me enough stability to mount the scale. And then with a little bit of modification to that support bracket, it gives me a spot that I can mount the reader for the vertical axis and then mount that scale over top of the slot for the power feed stop blocks. Well, the first thing I need to do then is to manufacture these 4 standoffs for the saddle bracket. But I need to figure out just how long they should be so that when I do make that bracket, it all is in the same plane. Well, what I have here is a simple carpenter's level that I'm setting right up against the base of the machine, And then I'm just measuring, once I know that it's plumb, measuring the distance between where that set screw is and the level. I'll do the same thing here for the feed change worm bracket, as well as some other features on the side of the machine. Well, after taking some measurements, some calculations, this is what I came up with. This top one is the screw replacement for the feed change worm bracket. And this one on the bottom is what's going to replace the set screws for the knee lock. Well, for the material, I have some 760 thousandths diameter 8620. This is turned, ground, and polished material I bought off of eBay. I've already cut them to a rough length, so now I just need to take them over to the lathe and we'll start machining the features. Well, normally I think I would probably machine each one of these parts completely before moving on to the next one, but I think I'm going to do things a little bit differently here. And instead of doing that, I'm going to machine the common features in succession with each of these parts. So all four of these parts get some common features. For example, the first feature is going to be a tapped hole for a 1/4 screw. It's going to be about an inch deep in the one side. So that's what I'm going to do first on all four pieces. Well, of course, the first operation, though, is to face off the end of the material. Well, the tap drill size for a 1/4 screw is a number 7. And before I do that, I'm going to spot this here with the center drill. I like to peck at this initially just to make sure that the center finds the true center of the part and it doesn't wander off. Well, next is a number 7 drill. I put a little bit of red paint on there just to make sure that I go deep enough. I think that's probably about 1.5 inches in. And of course, using a little bit of anchor lube here as a lubricant and coolant. Well, I'm going to get the tap started under power here. So I've got the lathe in back gear so I can slow it down. I got a spiral flute tap here. And again, we'll start with a little bit of anchor lube and just get it started. And then I'll complete it using a tap wrench. I'll also bring in my tap follower here just to make sure that it stays good and straight and minimizes the chances that I'll break a tap. What I like about these spiral flute taps is the chips get ejected out, so you don't really have to worry about them plugging up your hole or jamming in the flutes. Although I am having a little bit of difficulty with this one. I have the feeling this tap might be dull and it's time to toss it in the bin. Well, I have another tap here, another spiral flute tap. Let me take this one out and we'll try the other one. Yeah, this one's cutting a lot nicer, but it is getting a little stiff here, so I might be at the bottom of the hole. Let me go ahead and back this out.
Oh, mother.
Well, that is highly unfortunate. I'm going to see if I can't save this part. I do have some other material that I could use to remake this part. No idea why that tap broke. My only guess is that it got stiff because it was jammed up on a chip, and I made it worse by trying to go a little further. So I think I'll get a pair of vice grips and see if I can't get this out. Worst comes to worst, I'll just need to cut another length of material.
Wow.
Well, I'm really glad I was able to get that out and salvage this part. So now I need to find another tap that I can use to finish these holes. Well, I tossed those other two taps into the scrap bin, and I've got this 4-flute tap that seems to be cutting really nice. It's a nice sharp one. So we'll take this all the way down to the last thread here, I hope, and we should be good to go on this hole. Well, I should have chamfered the hole to begin with. It did leave a little bit of a burr in tapping it, so I'll just chamfer it now, and we'll clean up that burr. Probably have to run the tap down through it again, but yeah, I'll have to remember to do the chamfer first before I do the tapping. Well, this feature is complete on this part. All 4 of them get the same feature, so I'll go ahead and drill and tap the other 3 to match. With all of the holes drilled and tapped in each of these 4, the next thing I need to do is to cut these to length and machine the features on the other end. I'll start by facing off the opposite end here, since it's just been rough cut on the bandsaw. Well, I'm just using calipers here. I don't need this to be super precision, so I can calculate just how much needs to come off.
184 thousandths to come off.
Well, I have 184 thousandths to come off of this, so I'll take a few heavier roughing passes and then remeasure it.
.81 798 2. It's about 16 thousandths.
Well, I have about 16 thousandths more to come off. Well, I was shooting for 2 inches, 798 thousandths. Looks like I'm about a half thousandths off. I'll take that to the bank any day. Well, I need to machine a 3/8 thread on the end of this, which is going to be about 860 thousandths long. So I'll set this up here to have about 1.25 inches or so stick out. Well, I'll zero out the travidile, and I'll move in that 860 thousandths and set myself a little witness mark. Well, this stock is 760 thousandths in diameter, so I have 385 thousandths to come off for the 3/8 16 thread. I have one final pass to take here, and then I'll come all the way into that 860 thousandths length and clean up the face on the shoulder. Well, I'll break the corner there on that inside shoulder, and then I'll put a heavier chamfer on the end of it to make it easy to start the die. Before I start threading with the die, I want to cut a little thread relief right up on the shoulder. So I'm using my parting tool to come in about 35 to 40 thousandths deep. And we'll start with a little bit of anchor lube, of course. Well, I've got the appropriate die here in this die holder. I'm going to bring in my tailstock in order to keep the die nice and flat to the piece of material. Now, I can't turn this die handle all the way because it's bigger than what the swing of the lathe is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the chuck instead. I'll hold the die in place, and I'll just use a wrench here on the chuck jaws, and we'll just pull the chuck around, and then keeping constant pressure on the tailstock, just feeding it in order to keep constant pressure on that die so it stays straight throughout the whole threading operation. I will go ahead and run the lathe in reverse in order to remove the die off of the end. Well, I've got a nut here I can test just to make sure it goes all the way up to the shoulder, and that looks good. So this part can come out of the lathe, and that's all the lathe work for this part. Now I've got another one identical to it that I'll make next. Both of the shorter standoffs are complete. Now I can work on the longer ones. These also get a 3/8 16 thread on the end of it, about the same length. Now these longer standoffs also have this reduced shank at the end of about 800 thousandths in length. But I've got the cutter lined up on the end here so I can now zero the travadial and then traverse the carriage down the 800 thousandths that I want to reduce this piece down to and set a witness mark. Well, to bring this down to my target diameter of a 1/2 inch, I need to take 260 thousandths off of the diameter. So I'll take a couple of passes at 100 thousandths each and then one at 50, and then we'll measure and see how much more needs to come off. Well, I still have about 12 thousandths to come off. This isn't a critical dimension, but I would like to at least try to get a better surface finish than I have been getting. So I've swapped out the insert here with a TNGG insert. I've slowed my feed rate down, and hopefully I'll get a little bit better finish here, and then I'll also clean up that shoulder. Lastly, I'll use a chamfer tool here just to break those edges. Well, that should do it for all of the lathe work for these 4 parts. Now I need to go over to the bridge port so I can machine in some wrench flats. Well, I actually struggled a little bit with trying to figure out how I was going to hold these parts in order to machine these wrench flats. You know, originally I was going to just use a 3/4 inch collet, and I mistakenly bought this material that's 760 thousandths in diameter, and I really didn't want to machine off that last little bit, although I probably could have, but it would have been kind of a pain. So instead of using a collet, I've got a V-block here with a clamp that I think should be strong enough to hold it in position while I machine a couple of wrench flats. Well, I'm going to machine just 2 flats opposite each other. That'll be 3/8 of an inch wide. I would have done, 6 had I been able to put these in a collet block, but as it stands here, we'll just be satisfied with just the 2. Well, rather than crack out the edge finder, I'm just going to use a gauge pin here between the end mill and the standoff, and then just adjust the table until it's just snug. That tells me that I'm a known distance away from the end of the material. Well, I'll go ahead and plug that into the DRO and then make some adjustments here so that that end mill will cut a slot that's 3/8 of an inch from the end of the standoff. Well, I would like to cut the slots in the same spot on all of these standoffs, so I have a mag base here that I'm using as a vise stop. Well, I'll turn on the spindle here, and I'll just raise the knee enough to where the end mill is just touching the edge of the standoff. Well, in order for a 5/8 inch wrench to fit here, I need to cut a flat that's 68 thousandths of an inch deep. So I'll raise the table 68 thousandths, and we'll go ahead and take a single pass here. Okay, we'll go ahead and take this part out, and we'll do the other 3 the same way. While I did struggle quite a bit with trying to figure out how I was going to line this up to machine the flat on the opposite end. Well, what I ended up settling on here was just to take a piece of 3/8 inch tool steel and just fitting it in the opposite side flat and then lining it up, by eye, just making sure it was parallel and then tightening down the clamp. Well, a quick test with a wrench, and yeah, I think that's going to work just fine. So I'll do the other three the same way. Well, all the machining is now done on the standoffs. I'll take them over the bench and deburr them real quick, and we'll go ahead and try and install them on the side of the mill. Well, we'll start with these two here. These are the two that will get the reduced shank standoffs, and that was in order to clear this feed change bracket. It's a little narrow here at the area where the screw goes into, so I needed to reduce that just a little bit. We'll take out the old one and we'll try threading in the new standoff. Well, that fits in there real nice. Looks like I did a decent job of machining it. Let's go ahead and get the other one in now. Well, these look really good. The length looks just right. And if I hold up a piece of aluminum here, it looks like the plane that these will end up in is exactly what I was hoping for. Now the other two standoffs are to replace these set screws here, and all these set screws really do is hold this larger screw in place. It's part of the knee lock. We don't want that screw to actually rotate. So this one right here is a little bit trickier because the length of the exposed thread needs to be pretty spot on so that the shoulder fits up against nicely on the side of the knee, but that the thread is long enough that it captures that bolt head. Well, that bolt moved a little bit, which means those threads are a little bit short, but I really don't think that's going to be a problem. I think if I clean the paint off on the side of it, it might give me a little bit more room. Well, I have both of the shorter standoffs installed. I did have to do a little bit of grinding on the side of the knee to get them to fit just right. Especially the top one, it really needed to be a little flatter. That area on the knee had a little bit more contour than I would have liked. And I think everything seems to be planing out correctly. I think the standoffs are all in the same plane. And so now really it's going to be a matter of using this 2-inch aluminum. It's going to end up becoming my brackets. And I think the way I'm going to do this is going to be to create a weldment. I'm going to cut this into the various pieces and weld it together so the bracket ends up as one piece. And I shouldn't have any issue constructing this so that the bracket will give me a spot to mount this scale so it sits right over that pivot point for the stop for the vertical power feed, as well as over that feed change bracket. And as this comes together, I think what I'll do then is extend this bracket just a little bit further past here, which will give me a spot to mount the reader for the knee scale. Now, it's a little bit maybe tough to imagine this right now, but stay tuned. Hopefully this will become more clear as I continue to build this thing out. but that is going to have to wait for another day and another video. I am really excited about getting a DRO on this vintage machine. I wasn't sure I was ever really going to do that with this machine, but once I saw what the Dr. DRO was going to be capable of, I was convinced I needed to do this. So I am hoping that you like this video and you'll give it a thumbs up, or you'll leave me a comment down below, and better yet, you'll subscribe so you know when the next video is going to drop. And if you'd like to support some of this effort financially, you can do so by making a donation through PayPal or even joining me on Patreon. But that's going to have to be it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.